What about the socialization, the children? Who do they associate with?
Well, of course, if they're having a good Catholic family and not using contraceptives, they're having large families. And the best socialization, of course, is in the home and in the family. In fact, you know, the Pope is very clear in the documents that the socialization begins in the home. It's the interrelating with the other members of the family. See, the other members of the family are all different ages. You know, there's Dad, the authority figure, and there's Mom, the heart of the home. There's an older brother. There's a little one who's trying to break your model airplane. You know, the relating to people of all different ages and stages of development is actually a much better way of developing social virtues than spending all this time with all these kids at the same level of immaturity, you know, that happens in a classroom situation. It's ridiculous. That isn't any kind of socialization. In fact, one of the main reasons that we talked about before why families often choose homeschooling is because of the bad socialization. You know, kids using drugs and trying to get, you know, good Catholic children to use drugs. Of course, children are practicing what they're learning in school, so of course they're having sexual relations in the bushes as early as kindergarten, and so on and so forth. So it is the poor socialization that parents are trying to get away from, and it's the good, healthy socialization, interacting in their own family. And of course we encourage grandparents being in the family, you know, and we think that more families are starting to recognize the value of having grandparents in the home and children being able to understand the elderly. We think that's good for kids.
Very
so
good.
we believe in positive socialization. You know, I've written a book. May I mention it?
Sure.
It's called Catholic Homeschooling, a Handbook for Parents. The reason it's called a handbook, Mike, is because it's very practical tips. This is not some philosophical treatise or something like that. This is a real how-to-do-it book. It's about 500 pages, and we cover a little bit of everything in this book. Why Catholic homeschooling? What is Catholic homeschooling? The church teachings on marriage and education. And the reason that's so important is because the church is very clear that the graces which parents receive from the sacrament of matrimony gives them the ability to teach their own children. You see, the graces from each sacrament, whether it's baptism, whether it's confirmation, is to help them fulfill the duties of the sacrament. So when you get the graces from confirmation, you can really be a soldier of Christ, right? You can really defend your faith. Well, what are the duties of the sacrament of matrimony? They are to have children, but they're also to educate the children. So the church is very clear in very strong terms, and always has been and continues to be strong in its statement that from the sacrament of matrimony, parents have the graces to teach their own children. And the translation is very clear. This is not just religious, this is civil. One translation says civil education, one translation says civic education. In other words, to train the children to be citizens of their society. So they can teach them math, they can teach them history, and so on and so forth. So this covers quite a variety of things. Homeschooling in the large family, the father's role, discipline. If there is a main problem why families have problems homeschooling, it hasn't to do with the academics. It has to do with discipline. You know, families have to learn how to discipline their children according to biblical principles. So if they read my book, I talk to them about that.
Very good. Are there any laws or regulations concerning homeschooling?
The Supreme Court has ruled that no state can make a law or regulation which forbids home education, which forbids parents from making the choice of teaching their own children at home. But each state may make regulations in which they can at least see what is going on. So what happens in some states is, I mentioned to you the standardized test. Many states have a regulation that the children have to take the standardized test and at least pass the standardized test. So it differs from state to state, and we would put them in touch with their state homeschooling organization. Every state has a state home education association, and they are very aware of the legislation in the state. They're very aware of how a parent can go about fulfilling the requirements of the state.